Hello, everyone. My name is Janice Thomas, and I'm your host for today's show. Our mission is simple. We want to inform, empower, and equip families, educators, and leaders to create systems where every student can thrive. Today's conversation is titled Closing the Opportunity Gap, Building Bridges for Student Success. I know many of you, like myself, have heard across sexes and even in other nations, we talk a lot about achievements, test scores, grades, and graduation rates. But behind those numbers lies something deeper, the opportunity gap, the uneven access to resources, relationships, and experience that helps students reach their full potential. So whether you are a parent here with us today, an educator, a policymaker, or advocate, this episode will challenge you to see what's possible for our students when we work collectively to ensure that every child and every seat truly matters. Before I bring on our guests, I will read this disclaimer. This conversation is for educational and informational purposes only. This is a nonpartisan platform dedicated to promoting effective governance and civic engagement. Any opinion shared by our guests or even myself, it belongs to us. It's our own. It's not endorsed by any candidate, policy, or political organization. So at this time, we're going to bring forth to you Mr. James Hopper. He's the Executive Success Partner at the Education Service Center of Region 4.
Janice, thank you so much for having me this evening. I appreciate the opportunity to talk about such a timely and important topic as the opportunity gap that we're talking about. So again, thank you for having me.
Mr. Hopper, thank you for being here today. But before we get into this conversation, could you just tell us a little bit more about yourself, what you're doing at the Education Service Center?
Yes, ma'am. Yeah. Well, first off, a little bit about myself and my history. I started off as a teacher and an athletics coach here in Texas, and did that for a number of years. I loved it. I became a campus administrator. I spent 2 years as an assistant principal in middle school, and then I became a high school principal for another 10 years. I never had any desire whatsoever to be a superintendent, and so that's, of course, God has a sense of humor, and so that's exactly where I ended up. I spent the last 16 years of that part of my career as a superintendent, and actually loved every bit of it. So just because I wanted to spend a little bit more time with grandkids and do some writing and some publishing, that's why I segued out of it. But I've been able to continue the love up for the work through the service center. So through Education Service Center Region 4, I'm an executive success partner. And what that means is I get to spend meaningful time with superintendents in Region 4 and also training school boards. And right now I help direct the new Superintendent's Academy at Region 4 as well.
Oh, that sounds like some amazing work. I mean, you're still in the work. You say you made time so you can be with the grandchildren, but it sounds like you're still busy. Well, that's great. Well, thank you. Well, you ready to dive into these questions that I have for you? Just this conversation that we're going to talk about?
Let's go to the deep end.
All right. Well, our first one is we talk about the opportunity gap a lot. Actually, we talk about student achievement, but we are realistic and know that there is an opportunity gap. So how do you define the opportunity gap, and how does it differ from the achievement gap?
I don't know that there's really a difference here, but it's a way of focusing on the outcome. When we say that there's an achievement gap, what we're talking about is there's a difference in scores. This achievement gap has actually been noted going all the way back to the 30s. And even before that, with the first IQ test that we ever put out there. Certainly those IQ tests were biased in a lot of ways, but they actually showed favorable results for the fact that there's no reason for it to have any differences in scores. And I don't care what your ethnicity is. That doesn't have anything to do with scores so much as the environmental factors. And so when we know that and we see that, we've tried throughout the years to try to close that gap. And the reason we want to is because it's not just about getting good grades in school. What we see is that when we don't achieve academically, it's going to give limitations. It's going to have limitations on the lives of students as they get into adulthood. For instance, if I don't score high enough to get into college, that gives me roadblocks. We don't need to have roadblocks in the lives of our students. Or if I simply don't even achieve a certain literacy level, then again, I've got roadblocks in my life. And one of the things that we see, even down to the extreme of seeing that the inability to be reading on grade level by grades 3 or 4 even has tendency to almost predict incarceration levels later on. So it's a very dire thing, and it's very important to be able to close those gaps. So if we don't have achievement, we simply don't have opportunities to be successful in life. So that is the opportunity gap.
Oh, I really appreciate that, especially the piece. Like I know I've heard over and over again that, like when children are not reading on grade level by 3rd or 4th grade, that, more prisons go up. I've heard that. I actually facilitated in a prison, and that's why I actually learned that. And I was like appalled to hear that happens. But from your perspective, what are the most persistent barriers contributing to these gaps that exist here today in Texas in our schools?
Well, one of the things that's consistent across ethnicities and cross racial barriers are the low socioeconomic status of our kids. Now, it's a very, very complex response to that question. If there was a silver bullet, somebody would have fired that long ago, and we would have fixed this. But it's very complex. One of the things that we see with low socioeconomic students is simply having limited access to things like technology, limited access to books, limited access to discussions of education, even in the household. So we have access to materials, but we also have some cultural barriers. Sometimes we have, and again, this goes past ethnicities, past racial barriers. This is white, black, brown, in all of those cases. Sometimes we have simply cultural barriers that this is how we do things in our family. This is how we do things in our culture. And to be able to move in with students and have them see that this is, instead of having a culturally fixed mindset, to have a cultural growth mindset, so that they can move forward, but still yet never move away from their home culture. So it's a matter of breaking cultural barriers while maintaining cultural connections, because we never want to have them sever ties with their home.
Oh, I appreciate that response. So, yeah, can you share a few examples with us on the state level initiatives around like teacher incentive allotments, accelerated instructions, or tutoring supports that are making measurable difference? Are those things actually, which I just named, actually making measurable difference for our students?
Well, I think the answer to that varies from district to district, of course. Certainly, teacher incentive allotment, which was the first thing you mentioned. There's no question but what longevity in the classroom contributes to student success. Longevity in the administrative roles as well. The more we have revolving doors in these positions, the more detrimental it is for our kids. So to be able to have those teachers in those classrooms, and to have them making a career out of it, as opposed to getting out early because maybe they just can't make enough money. So the TIA has worked very well in that level. Accelerated instruction is another one that's a great support, and that simply means that we're going to go in there and we're going to work very diligently on the things that that student is having difficulty with. And we're going to target those as well as the tutoring supports. So each one of those are very viable, but the education process is not a one size fits all. As I've told my staff for years, we don't teach material, we teach students. And so the most valuable thing that we can do for our students is to know each student by their strengths, by their needs, and by their unique characteristics. If I know what your strengths are, I can help you build on those. If I know what your needs are, then again, I can help strengthen those needs and support those. And unique characteristics, that tells us a little bit about what that child's interests are, what motivates them. If I know what motivates a child, I can teach them. So that's very important to know those things. So any program that we put out there, while it can be a great plan, the implementation has to include knowing your students very well.
Yeah, that's our primary focus of our work is our students. And we're always talking about, that is like the key. Focus on student outcomes. Focus on if what we're putting in place is working or if it's not working. And that actually becomes our pivot to say, we need to do something different if it's not working, especially on our campuses that are in need of, that actually is an intervention campus. So thank you for your response to that question. So how does TEA support districts in using the data to identify and close those opportunity gaps early, particularly among those students that I'm talking about, the economic disadvantage or the special population students?
Well, what TEA does, of course, is they're going to through state assessments monitor how well your kids are doing. But one of the things that we do with those assessments is we're able to break those down by the subpopulations. Here's your students as a whole. We have to be able to disaggregate the data. So yes, maybe our students have done overall pretty good. Let's say we get a solid B rating in our district, but maybe we have a group over here, one of our subpopulations that consistently doesn't do well. It could be our bilingual students, and maybe it's our whatever the socioeconomic group it is, or whatever that subpopulation is. We can go in there and disaggregate that data and say, why is this happening? There's a reason we're not being as effective here as we are over there. And what that does is it enables us then to go in with that subpopulation and be more specific about addressing those students' needs based on that population. And not only the subpopulation, but then take a look at which parts of that state assessment did they not do well in. And that can point us to things like, for instance, our curriculum. Are we doing things in the proper sequence, or are we emphasizing? Sometimes what we do is we'll emphasize something very well, but it wasn't the thing that we needed to emphasize. It's like one fellow put it to me years ago. Sometimes we're successful at the wrong things. Teachers are working hard, administrators are working hard, but we should have had our focus over here. By disaggregating that data, it gives us that information so we can see, wow, let's take that same effort, those same resources, and move them over here on this particular thing. So the fact that TEA establishes the accountability, and face it, everybody in life is accountable. That's what we do. As human beings, we all accept that accountability. As a matter of fact, we should thrive on accountability, no matter what your position is. So the fact that we have that, nobody likes taking these so many tests. But on the other hand, we do have to have a way to measure the effectiveness of what we're doing.
Right. No one likes to take tests, but I definitely agree that we do have to have ways that we measure to see if what we actually are teaching our children, if it's working for us. Is it something that we want them to continue to do. So how is Region 4 leveraging the professional learning, the coaching, or the MTSS framework to ensure consistency in the equity-minded instructions across the campuses? I know that's maybe like a conversation by itself, but can you give me something brief to work with?
Well, we actually have entire departments, and I'll mention our Center for Strategic District Support, so it's a very aptly named department. Again, we strategically go in there and support districts according to their data and their very specific needs. And so with that, we do go in and design professional development throughout the year. For teachers, actually people in every level of our schools, because everyone is involved in the success of our kids. And so we can go in and with the district, take a look at their data, help them, again, disaggregate their data, and make sure that they're addressing those needs. We have something something called the Texas Strategic Leadership, TSL. Anyway, we help districts with that as well. And it's a matter of basically contracting with the districts to go in there and find out what they need, and then moving in to address those needs.
Well, it's definitely good to know that those supports do exist for our districts out here. But what practices have you observed that are actually moving the needle on student outcomes? What practices are you finding that are actually making some movement, some traction?
Yes, ma'am. And again, this is one of those questions that there's not a silver bullet. There's not a one size fits all. But here are some things that certainly just some tried and true principles. You have to have data-driven instruction. You have to be able to take a look at your data to find out where you are. You cannot determine where you need to go until you know where you are. So once you see that, now you know what you need to do. So the data-driven instruction is a non-negotiable. High dosage tutoring. In other words, when we talk, this is the accelerated learning we were talking about a little bit earlier. That whether it's daily or near daily type of tutoring, especially in math. Math is very sequential. We have two things that we really have to make sure that we do, of course, and that is our literacy, and then math, which we call numeracy. Math is very sequential. And so what that means is if I missed something, it could be that my family moved back when I was in fourth grade, and I had a really good teacher, or maybe I didn't, and I moved into another school district that their curriculum was structured a little bit differently, and I could have picked up a gap there, and it was never addressed. And I'm always going to carry that weakness until we go back and somebody sees little Johnny didn't catch that. We need to go back and work with little Johnny on that. Otherwise, he's never going to get it. So that's going to be important. Culturally responsive teaching is another one. And this is many things to many people. What does it mean to be culturally responsive? Well, you have to know your kids. Where are they coming from? And what is their mindset coming into the building? So that's extremely important. Incorporating the students' cultural backgrounds into the pedagogy is extremely important, so that the kids you can relate to the students. Again, I go back to knowing those kids by their unique characteristics and their strengths and their needs. We also want to expand their learning time as much as possible. Can we have extended school days? A lot of schools are doing that, or summer programs where you can go in and now fill the gaps. Here's a problem with students who come from low socioeconomic families. Typically, they start school behind. because in those families, a lot of times, maybe mom and dad are both working and they're really not at home much. Nobody's fault. It's not that they're bad parents. They're just not there as often. And this happens in other homes, by the way, as well. So what happens is there's not a lot of talk about books and those kinds of things. Maybe somebody isn't pushing that at home as much as in other homes. Well, what happens is, let's say those kids learn at the same rate all year long because the IQ is the same, but one started ahead of the other one. So they learn at the same rate all year long. Well, now the next summer comes and they're back home again. In some homes, they will continue educational type activities. They'll go to a museum, they'll go to a zoo, and they'll talk about how things are all interrelated. They will discuss educational type of things. In the other home, that's not happening. So what happens is over the summer, that gap increases some more. Then those kids go back to school again. Once again, they keep pace with each other, sort of. And in the next summer, that gap increases more. So what you have is a situation where that student who's behind really never catches up. As a matter of fact, that gap continues to grow. So when you have things like extended learning time at home or even after school to help make that up. So that's very important. One year we had as our theme in my school, it was Mission 1+, which meant not just a year's growth. 1 year's growth is not good enough. It's 1+. If this kid's already a year ahead of that one, and they both enter the same grade level, okay, this one here has got to run. Can't just gain a year, because this one's going to gain a year. This one's got to gain a year plus if they're ever going to be equitable. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So would you say that is how you measure, or that's the data or the indicators that you all look at to actually see if, like, let's say a campus that has intervention, right? And so if we're actually improving on those campuses, so that intervention campus is now actually being transformed, or are those like some of the indicators or the data that you would look at to be able to make that determination?
Well, actually, one of the things that we can look at is to go back to, and just to use, we've talked a little bit already about TEA and their measures. So if you take a look at how much did they gain this year, you can actually see that on the data. Did they gain more than a year's growth, or what that expected growth level was? Maybe they gain more than what we expect them to grow a certain amount every year because we taught them something. What we have to have in order to close that gap, and it's measurable, is, wow, they not only gained what we expected, but they exceeded the growth level that we expected from them. That's what you're looking for.
And is that conversation that actually exists, and this is important to me, that conversation that actually exists at most board meetings, right? When the superintendent actually come out and he's speaking with the board, is that monitoring conversation that, I believe that's an important conversation that the community should be aware of. Is that a time for us to kind of gauge those the data and the indicators?
Yes, ma'am. We have that data. So what you would need to do then, and to answer your question, it's going to be different again in every district, how deep they go into that. It's a question to ask in your home district, or more specifically too, if you want to get down to it, like, you have a really large district. Well, then let's go to your campus and let's see what's going on there, because that's more specific to your situation. If you have a very large district, then your data will have a tendency to be watered down, of course. It may or may not come up very specifically in the board meeting, but it's certainly data that could be shared. Yes, ma'am.
Oh, okay. So how can we make our families more informed on making educational system decisions? Like, how can we empower them, and where they are more informed and making decisions as it relates to their child education?
Well, that would be a great question to ask as we go. Number one, my child's in school. I'd like to know this past year, what sort of growth did my child see? Now, we get those, parents do get those reports. Sometimes it may be difficult for them to actually kind of decipher those reports. and we invite, and schools all invite parents, please let us know if you have questions about that. It's your report. This is your child's data. If anybody's entitled to it, the parent is. So and if you have to, go up to the school and sit down and say, look, I'm not a professional educator. I just want to know how's he doing, and was his growth on par, or was it above or below or whatever? And if it wasn't where it should be, can you tell me specifically why that was? And so the school should be able to go back and say, well, here were some weak spots that took place, okay, in the performance of the testing anyway. So anyway, those are questions that parents can ask. And then overall, how'd the campus do? Maybe my child did great, but overall maybe the campus didn't, or vice versa. Maybe everybody else did well, but my child did not. Well, that'd be a good question to ask. So, but the main thing is to partner with that school district. It's not a matter of being antagonistic toward the school district at all. In fact, schools want parents who will go in there and partner with them and ask those questions. Because if I ask the question about my child, and I'm certainly interested in where they're falling down, then I can use that information at home to sit down with them and work on those. If I don't know what it is, I can't address it. So I want to partner with my child's teachers to make sure that my child is getting where they need to be, because frankly, we need it. Schools need parents to partner with them for the success of their child. We teach kids, but so do parents. Parents teach kids in a huge way. So we need that partnership.
I definitely agree. I actually went to a families and parent conference this weekend, last week. And we co-parenting, right? And so, because we definitely want to see growth and see our children thrive. So parents are co-parenting with the schools and their teachers, the child's teachers. And so that's really important. But one of the things I found through the work that I do under this nonprofit, there's a lot of misconceptions families have about like school choice and the funding and accountability. How can we inform them? How can I, as an organizational leader, my goal is to really help parents grow and to be more involved and engaged in what's going on in their child's schools or even at the district. Actually, to be a voice, not only for their child, but for the other children in the campus, not only for the students, but also for the teachers. And not only for the teachers, just the leadership and making sure that the needs of the campuses are met. And so how can I better inform the parents about, this is what school choice is about, the funding and accountability?
Yes, ma'am. There's a whole lot there. So this, as far as school choice is concerned, I would advise, what parents need to do is educate themselves very thoroughly. Just because you have an option doesn't mean you should take it as who was it, Yogi Berra, that said years ago, when you come to a fork in the road, take it. It may not always be the right thing to do. So look very closely into what that option is, because the grass isn't always greener. Maybe it is. But with school choice, also take into consideration, and by the way, I want to preface what I say. This is a parent's choice, and parents should exercise whatever choices they have to the extent that it's the best thing for their child. So wouldn't withhold that from anybody. But having said that, the idea that a choice exists doesn't mean that it's always a better choice. So investigate that very carefully. And the thing to understand also is every time you make a change in your child's schooling, unless there's a substantial difference in the quality, typically there's a little bit of a lag in student learning. They've got to relearn the organization. They've got to, okay, what are the rules here? How do we do things here? So there's a little bit of a lag there. I saw this happen firsthand when I was high school principal. And so it was a very difficult thing. We actually had students from a private school who would transfer to our public school, and every one of them, and this private school, by the way, had a fantastic reputation in academics. Every one of those students, when they transferred to our school, would drop a letter grade. I mean, if you were an A student, they became a B student, because our academic pace was so much more rigorous than what the other one was, that the good students, they adjusted and said, okay, so that's the pace, and they picked it up and they were fine. But the ones who weren't good students and thought they were, they never regained it. And so be careful about changing campuses for that reason as well. But funding, you ask how parents find out about funding as well. Well, funding is that's an incredibly complex issue. Clearly, if you have more, you can do more. But make sure also that our job in education is to also be good stewards of what we do have. Let's spend well what we have and spend it on the right things. And we need to squeeze every penny till it screams. But that being said, yes, we do need that funding to be there, to be able to get things for our kids, all the materials they need. And the last thing you asked about was accountability. And again, the accountability in our schools is important, but it's also important to the parent. Here's a key question that I think every parent should ask every teacher. When I have my parent meeting, and I didn't say if, when, every parent should go and meet their child's teacher and have some meetings throughout the year, 1, 2, 3 times, whatever is necessary in your particular case. But here's what I want to ask my teacher. I want them to tell me something about my child academically that I do not know. You spend a lot of time with my child every day, and I'd like to know something. And I don't want, even if it's not pretty, as a matter of fact, I would almost rather hear that. I want to hear where they need help. And as the teacher, it's incumbent upon us as educators to be able to give you that information. So I think as a parent, that's one of the best things you can do for your child, to advocate for your child, is to go in there and get something besides, hey, your child's doing great, everything's going fantastic, don't worry about it, see you next time. That's not the visit I want from a teacher. I want that teacher to say, you know what, he does really well. He struggles a little bit with this sometimes. And here's something that I found is really neat about him. I want to know that teacher knows my child.
All right, that's good. I really appreciate you saying that. Parents should be, as parents, we want to be more detailed and specific about what is it that we need to try to get for our children to, make sure that they do receive that additional support. And so I really appreciate that. And then when we, in our choice, like being able to choose what we want to get for our children, how do we, I guess, we don't want to make that another inequity, like further the gap. Is there anything that you would suggest that parents should kind of look for? Because like if, I may choose to keep my baby in public, or I may choose to put it in private. I might just homeschool. So how do I, keep that from being another form of inequity? Because I'm dissatisfied with like where they at. How do I kind of avoid that?
Well, I will tell you this. If you're asking, how do you ensure that it doesn't become another form of inequity? There's in a lot of ways it can. And if what you're asking is in one way, it can be a form of automatic inequity, because there are certain kids or certain families, I should say, that they can facilitate that move for their child. And so all the families that can facilitate that move will do so if that's what they choose to do. But you have some families that cannot facilitate that move. For instance, maybe my husband catches a bus to go to work because we don't have a vehicle, and then I have to walk to work. We don't have a vehicle, so we can't transport my child to that other school that's available to us, but they don't have transportation. So automatically you have those who can get there and those who can't. That's a form of inequity by itself. So you keep, it's just one of the things that happens when you have choice like that. It's where you have increased freedoms, you also are going to have the potential for some increased inequities. It's going to be great for some kids, and for others, it's not.
And even when you talked about the funding, and the same scenario that you just shared, the funding is really, we try to steer it in a direction where we can provide those students who lack the support and opportunities, trying to create a balance there in that funding. That seems like it's definitely a challenge. It's definitely a community challenge, of course, with where they should put the funding. And so we primarily say the funding should be over where the students have the greatest need. So got that.
And it's, yes, ma'am. And one of the reasons you see such a difference in opinion about things like increased number of charter schools and those kinds of things, an increased number of I firmly believe in competition. However, one of the things we have to know full well is that when you do that over here, where you have a school that maybe they've been struggling a little bit, and so parents want to pull their kids out. Well, I certainly understand that. When you pull out a significant number of kids, the likelihood that that school is going to get better just got more difficult, because not only are you pulling those students, you're also pulling funding. So for those students there then who can't move, you just now restricted the ability of that school to actually get better with the resources, because now those are now diminished. So that's why we have such a differing of opinions in those matters. So.
Okay, so now we're going to shift into the leadership. So could you help me with this? So what roles does leadership play in creating those cultures where students have opportunities to thrive?
Well, your leadership is key, of course, because you set the standard, you set the initiative. The leader has to be passionate about serving kids, and when you're passionate about serving kids, as the if you'll allow me to use a biblical reference, serve the least of these. And so that's what we're talking about. The students who most need us are the students that we need to be paying attention to. So the leadership plays a role in creating cultures where opportunity thrives, in going and making sure that at the principal, the campus leader level, that those campus leaders are also carrying that through down to the teachers, and the teachers are following suit. Now, one of the ways you do that too is teachers love to teach. They just want to teach kids. That's what true teachers just want to. They put their nose to the grindstone. My goodness, they take that work home. They work on weekends, and then they come right back and do it again. They absolutely love it. But what you want to do with a teacher like that is apply something that I've always called earned autonomy. That teacher has shown that they work hard, they're diligent, they're creative. I want a creative teacher that works hard. I want to give them more leeway to be even more creative. I want them to know that if they take risks in that classroom where they say, hey, I don't know if this is going to work or not, but I think it might. I want them to be creative, such that if it doesn't work the way they thought it was going to, they're not going to have the rug pulled out from under them. They're going to be supported. And as a matter of fact, we'll sit down and say, well, great, it didn't work the way you thought, but what did you learn from it? Oh my gosh, I learned this, this, and this. So how would you reframe that and come back now to teach that kid? Well, I would do this, this, and this. You just, not only did the teacher get better, but also the instruction in the classroom just got better. So that starts at the top. That goes to the building principal, of course, and then to the superintendent. And that type of a culture is huge in making that growth. So you have to be a little bit vulnerable, but you have to be strong enough to be vulnerable to make that happen at the leadership level.
Yeah, and then you're changing that leadership, and the leadership and the principals and the teachers, and you want to shift that focus to making it the mindset of those adults that's on the campus more equitable towards student outcomes. Do you see that shift happening in that? Because the way you described that was extremely powerful, and I can actually see that happening.
Yeah, that's exactly right. We have to shift those mindsets and let them know that there are no caps here. There are no caps. In other words, sometimes I have seen or I've heard about in some campuses where maybe the teachers have experienced such mediocre to poor results for so long that even the teachers themselves don't even realize it, but they don't think their kids are ever going to get there. And that fixed mindset is almost a death knell for those students. If that teacher just doesn't believe it, then they're going to cut back on their effort. Hey, we'll just kind of float here where we are. But this idea of going to the next level just isn't there. So it's very important. Research tells us that the single most influential person as far as students' performance is concerned in the schools is the campus principal. That person, because they have the authority to work with all the teachers and to emphasize what's important and to guide curriculum, to guide instruction. They are the single most influential person in the whole district when it comes to that. Now, that's a collective thing. The classroom teachers, of course, your school is only as good as your teachers, and your principal is the one that makes sure that they have the time, the tools, the training, and the teamwork to do what they need to do. If you give your teachers those things, they can make hay with it.
That's why the relationship is extremely important. The relationship that's established on the campus with the principal and the teachers, as well as with the parents, is extremely important, because the core of our work is those students. And we want to, have those relationships and make sure that everyone, has that belief, right? Not to get stagnant and just like it's not possible. But if we maintain that mindset of growth for our students and even growth in our work, I believe that we can make some major changes for our students. And so, what strategies or tools do you use, or would you recommend that you found, I'll say, that help turn goals into measurable impact?
Well, one of the biggest things that you can do is to make sure that your students have agency over their own learning. And that is a major concept. When I was in school, going through elementary and middle school and high school and all that, it was, well, I had a good teacher here, so I did well there. I didn't have a good teacher here, so I didn't do well there. Well, the bottom line is I'm responsible for my own learning. And so what I want to be able to do is teach kids way back in pre-K and kindergarten, from that level on up, your learning is your responsibility. And so with that, if I've got agency over that, I can ensure that happens to a certain degree. So that's a huge tool to use to help our kids turn those goals into to have measurable impact. The other one is, if I'm going to do that, that student has got to know how they're doing. Grades right now, or not right now, but grades as they used to be kept, were simply, well, that's just how I move from this level to the next, and the big question was, when we're doing something, are you taking a grade? Because that's going to determine how much effort I put into it. What we want to do is take that vernacular out of it and say, what are you learning? So But regardless, we do have to give a mark in there that shows, how much you're learning. So if it's a true mark of how much that child has learned, we want to be able to show them that. So maybe I have a 74 average in a class. Not only do I know my average in there, give or take, but I also know why I have a 74. We need to be able to give them that feedback. Gosh, it's nothing more than, you're turning in assignments late. Well, I can fix that. That's entirely within my grasp to do it. Or maybe there's a concept that I'm just not getting and it's really holding me up. If I can get past that concept, wow, my grade can shoot up. So that's important. But the other thing that we need to do to make sure that happens, if you're going to make the student the agent of their own learning, we're going to have to do a better job of talking about why it's important. Because we do that forever. We've talked about, you just have to make a better grade. Well, that's all well and good, but why is that? What makes you think I want to make all these good grades? I just want to do what I have to do to get out of here. So now that comes back to knowing the student's strengths, their needs, and their unique characteristics. So if you understand what motivates that child, then you're more apt to be able to get them where you need them to go for that simple reason. You get that motivation, and that's a quality teacher that can do that.
I really appreciate that piece of the conversation too, especially about making students an agent of their own learning. And I see that actually working for the student as well as for the teacher, in that way that the instructions of the teaching, the learning that's happening in that moment can actually be discussed. I think that getting student feedback and feel about things is extremely important. I know many times in many spaces when we're talking about the child and what we believe is best for that child. But it's mostly important to make sure that child is in there to give us the feedback that they have to help us improve in the instructions that we're doing. That's part of the growth, right? Because we're all growing together. And so if there's something that is being taught that the child may not understand, need more clarification on, or you and I had a conversation today, but that's going to be another story, but may just not understand the teacher. And so it's really important to get that input about the child. You want to add something to that or what?
No, we could go on and on, but I'll let you I'll let you go on to your next one. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. So the next one is, what is the biggest blind spots you think leaders face when trying to address opportunity gaps, and how can they overcome them?
Yes, ma'am. So one of the biggest blind spots we have is something. It's a term that a lot of people have heard, and maybe some don't really understand much about it, and that is implicit bias. First off, we all have biases, and I don't care who you are. We all have it. Implicit simply means you're not really aware of it. And we have those things that we're certainly aware of in our biases. Maybe I want the Houston Texans to win all their football games. I'm certainly, that's an explicit bias, and I will tell people that. But an implicit bias is something that I feel, think, or believe, but I'm not even really aware of it. I just simply respond to it. Now, there's nothing wrong with having implicit bias. In fact, every human being is hardwired for it. It's the same thing that tells you when you're walking down the street and you see people walking your direction and you don't feel safe with what you see walking your direction. So you change and you go on the other side of the street. Well, that's implicit bias. It is prejudging, but it's also called self-preservation. Okay, so it's a defense mechanism. However, with any good tool, it can always be used inappropriately and be used in a way that it shouldn't be used. For instance, implicit bias. I'm a kindergarten teacher, and I have 20 kids walk in my class the first day. And I already know through experience that boys are rowdier than girls, right? and then I've been my experience through all these years. So here comes a boy, and I'm going to keep my eye on him because that little fella, he's just got too much energy in him. Or we may even be implicit bias because here's a student of a particular ethnicity, and we're thinking, okay, there's an implicit bias there. I'm going to have to do this or do that, as opposed to simply getting to know the child. Each of these kids are individuals, and they're not going to be defined by their gender. They're not going to be defined by their race or their ethnicity. They're not even really going to be defined by their socioeconomic status. So as a teacher, one of the things that we can do, and I say teachers, the same thing applies to administrators, bus drivers, everybody. That's just people in general. We need to be able to treat these kids as individuals. So what happens is inadvertently, we will treat students a certain way based on our implicit biases. And so there's an activity that I like to use when talking to people about implicit bias. I actually learned this from another researcher who just gave them a scenario. And after giving them the scenario, for instance, they said, well, the airplane pilot came out and met you and shook your hand and then went back to the cockpit. And the question was, now that you've heard the whole story, in the picture that you just made in your mind, what gender was that pilot? What race was that pilot? That pilot. Okay. And so you pictured that in your mind, and you pictured it based on your implicit bias. So we have those implicit bias, and it's simply a matter of saying, okay, I get it. So I do have those preconceived ideas of what this is going to be, and that's to be expected. Most pilots are overwhelmingly male, and we've got a lot of Caucasian pilots. Okay, so we're expecting a lot of times that would be the case, but maybe not. It doesn't have to be at all. So it could be a black female pilot. But what does my implicit bias say? That's harmless, except that when it comes to dealing with kids, we have to make sure that we're treating those kids equitably. So that's one of the blind spots that all of our leaders and all of our folks, when we're trying to address that opportunity gap, that's a huge one.
I really appreciate that. As you were sharing that about the blind spots and the implicit bias, I was a female pilot. I don't think I've ran across one yet, so I guess I have that. When it comes to talking about these, you asked me that question. Mr. Hopper, this has been great, and we're almost down to the very end. If we was to gather again like 5 years from now, what progress would you hope to see in Texas regarding equity and opportunities for our students?
I would love to see the gap close exponentially. The opportunity gap, the student, what we call the academic achievement gap. I would love to see that speed up. We do have good news. It actually is closing. However, it is closing at such a tiny, minuscule rate that it's going to take another generation before it's even up to being equal. And so it's taking too long for that to happen. In a society where we have had so many technological advances, we need to be able to cut through and start making some significant impact on this opportunity gap. It's a multi-layered situation. That one of the things you mentioned, Janice, was the role of the community, the role of the parents. They have to be involved in this process and partnering with the schools. The schools have to make parents feel welcome. We want parents on our campus. We want parents working with us. And if a parent doesn't feel welcome on their campus, they need to express that in a civil way, of course, but let their administrator know that, hey, I really don't feel comfortable on the campus, and I don't feel like you really want me here, and I really want to be here. Now, most schools, that's probably not the case, but should that be the case, that's a part of it, is being able to say sometimes the uncomfortable things in order to get where we need to be.
I love that, because I'm always, that is my goal. I just feel like I know that parents play a major part in their child's education. They need the support, the students need the support, and of course the campus needs the support. And so, like as we continue, and you just said that there's a role for parents, educators, and the community leaders, so we can move closer to the vision. Because I see that as a city, we're actually growing. We're growing as a state, and that growth is seen in us as a body of people, and so that support is definitely needed. So, yeah, Mr. Hopper, I really appreciate you. I appreciate the time you've given us today. I've seen some questions come through, some statements come through from the people that's watching us on the day, and I really appreciate you guys as we continue to bring information forth to help you as parents, to help educators in educating our children, to help you as community organizations, community leaders, to help you identify what work or what role you want to play in helping support our students and actually closing this achievement gap. Because this is all of us. This cannot be done just by the district, just by the superintendent alone, just by the teachers. It's just so much that has to be done, and I just truly believe that as a community of people, we can do this. We can make some great things happen.
Yes, ma'am. I agree with you.
Okay, so Mr. Hopper, thank you again for your time. To the audience, we're actually going to be doing a Peace Pop-Up and Education Summit on this Saturday here at this office, which is at 9410 Mesa, Building B. We just want to bring the community together and just share information and resources to help move. This is a movement. A lot of people need the information. They need the support. They want to be involved. And so you can also reach out to me on my website. I believe they shared it across the screen, but it is at www.discoveringyou.info. That is my website. I also put out blogs to share as I gather information through research or talking to experts like Mr. Hopper. I share that information out to our community so that our community would know what they can do, how they can support our students, and get those opportunities available for them. So again, thank you.
Thank you, Janice, for having me.
Thank you. You're great.